Welcome to the Moms I Know with Sheila Walsh-Dunton and Maria Anderson-Farner. Two moms on a mission to reclaim childhood and take you from surviving to thriving on your parenting journey.
Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free.
Hi, this is Maria. And this is Sheila. And we want to welcome you to the Moms I Know.
Thank you for that beautiful quote. Chloe Rachel Gallaway, we are so excited to have you here today on our podcast to interview you. And it's been so exciting getting to follow your story and learn a little bit more about you. So Chloe is the author of The Soulful Child, 12 Years in the Wilderness. It's her memoir. She's also the founder of the Winged River Writer. And she has created the Voices program where she is working with people on storytelling. And so, Chloe, I really appreciate you being here today. When I read your book, I was so struck by the power of your childhood and the unique upbringing that you had, but also the beauty of what you were experiencing with your family. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about that story, just briefly, for our listeners to, I would hope to inspire them to read the book. It's an amazing book.
Thank you, Maria. Wow. Well, thank you for having me today. Thank you, Sheila. I'm really excited to be here. You've spent time connecting with people online and getting to know bits and pieces of their lives, right? And then you have the moment where you come together. So that's this moment for us. And it did begin, I think, with the Soulful Child. And I'm so grateful to myself for listening to the call to write this book. It really was a soul calling, I feel, one that had a lot of resistance initially, whereas I feel like most soul callings do have resistance because there's a lot to face when we're doing soul level work. And owning our stories and deep storytelling really is on a soul level, right? It's a deeper subconscious. It's really going to the higher self, going to the deeper parts of the self. To look back at your life. And that's what I was doing when I wrote The Soulful Child, which, as you said, it's a very unique story about my experience growing up in the wilderness till I was 12. There were 6 kids altogether, and some of my brothers were older than me. I'm a middle child, and then I have 2 younger siblings. So we lived self-sufficiently, sustainably off the land, 400 acres of wilderness in a very remote area in northern New Mexico. During the 70s and 80s, during the period where everybody was watching the Smurfs and I don't know what other cartoons and things, we had no TV, no running water, no electricity, no outside worldly amenities, traveled by horseback often, and occasionally had a vehicle that ran if we could get it to run. So.
Now, I noticed that you waited to write this story until you had your first child, your daughter.
That's right. I don't know how you guys feel about motherhood, but for me, like I say at the beginning of my book, but that it cracked me open, both literally and metaphorically. And sometimes we need something to crack us open to really access the courage to fulfill some of our biggest desires and our biggest dreams. And it's because, that resistance or fear that maybe is living inside of us for so many years, there's a wall, if you will, that gets built up there. And we can live inside of that wall just with our dream not being activated. We want it, but we don't know how to activate it, right? And so for me, the catalyst really was having my first child. And the need grew so strong, looking down at her just innocent little body and nursing on my breast. And I really felt the need to face my past and to understand my father in particular, who was the one that really was the leader in having us grow up in the wilderness. And my mother was just so in love with my father that she was kind of following along that path. And it's a very complex story with family dynamics of a great deal of love, but also some dysfunction and abuse and facing many different elements of trauma. And I was carrying all of that in my body because I believe that we carry our stories in our whole body, not just in our mind and our memory, right? But literally in our blood. And so it's like giving birth to Sophia woke everything up, right? If you think about birth and the blood and the cracking open and the coming through. And so literally 3 months after she was born is when I started writing the book.
Amazing. Our children, we've said this before, Sheila and I talk about this, our children are our greatest teachers. And I think they bring us to places where we might not have gone otherwise. I'm always so grateful for my children. I think they really help us to become more full human beings. And so we get to embrace all of those aspects. So what's so interesting is Sheila and I, our background is we met each other through the homeschool community. And so, this sort of intentional homeschool community that was created for families that chose to do that, but within a bit more of a structure. Your family, of course, you were saying that you were homeschooling in isolation and that you didn't have access to television and all of the cultural things that were going on at the time. And when I was reading the book, I was feeling as if that was such a gift that you all experienced, this ability to be so close to nature, not have the distractions of this contemporary society. And so, for me, there was that sort of wistfulness of, oh my gosh, I wish I'd had more of an upbringing like that instead of sort of this typical suburban upbringing.
Right.
And yet there's always the pros and the cons. And so in your writing, you write of the land and nature and the animals so beautifully. And yet there's also this thread that goes through of this longing for community, longing for something else. And I find that, in all of our stories, there is that. There is what we received and also what we were missing. And so when we have our children, then we get to look back at that and we get to heal some of that as well. And so I feel as if the writing of this book for you was such a healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, in so many ways, it was a pilgrimage of forgiveness for me. And wow, forgiveness is such a term to unpack, right? Mm-hmm. But it has to do with love, I feel like, at the root of that, right? Forgiveness is about love. It's about self-love, about acceptance, about coming home to oneself. Like you say, there were many gifts in my childhood. I feel like writing the book, I really got that, right? And how much did that enable me then to forgive my parents in areas where there was trauma and their relationship was falling apart? And imagine that happening in isolation. That happens a great deal in the world today, right? But without there being supports around that. Except that there were supports for me. There was nature. There was literally trees. Like, I have a very unique relationship with trees. I can feel them. I can communicate with them. And the same thing with animals. And so I think you probably picked up on some of that in the book, where it's like, I would not have had that had I not been in that experience where it was just so in depth and there was such a great need for that connection, to the horses, to the goats, and to the trees. It's like, still till this day, I can be in a bad mood or feel hurt or sad or upset with someone, and I can go out and be with a tree, and that right there will shift my energy. Now, this type of connection is missing in the world, right? To Mother Nature.
Yes.
And is part of my purpose, and my hope with the book is to, of course, stir a lot of emotions and help people walk this path of forgiveness in their own lives. But that connection to nature, to recognize Mother Nature as a symbiotic relationship, as a healer with us. But she cannot be healer with us if we constantly damage her, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we speak a lot of the importance of a more simple childhood. One of the things that Sheila and I really advocate is, getting outside, getting unplugged, raising our children in nature, spending more time outside, spending time together as a family, that connection of the family unit, and really having those family dinners and the family traditions and all of those kinds of things. And so even though there were the challenges going on within your family, there was so much of that connection. And, so I really feel that contributed to your being the deep and soulful person that you are. And when we look at society today, that is what's lacking. And so, we're advocating for people to kind of go back to a simpler time.
Yes.
And so, your father and your mother chose to create that for you. And yet then, there was what was missing was that community.
If I can just say something about that, because I feel like for my father, he did not feel like he had a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not that's true, I think that there's a great deal of compassion we can have when we feel like we're faced with a situation where, okay, I don't want to be of the world, or I want to have a simpler life, or I want my children to be raised with core values and strength and courage and bravery and not be addicted to electronics or television, and to have an independence in heart and mind. Mm-hmm. And be able to think for themselves, right? And so at his, because he was very much of the world, and he was a musician, and he was a part of all of that, and he was kind of what you would say at the top of your game with that, right? Somebody that did really well in school and had scholarships to really good schools, and played music and was very loved for that as well. It's a very curious thing why he didn't feel that. He just saw himself slipping into that by being, idled in a sense, but then slipping away, his values slipping away, and not being able to create those values and those things that he really wanted for his children. So out of not feeling like there was much choice to do it in community, right, I think was part of his decision to do it alone.
Mm-hmm. Which then took your whole family off into the wilderness in isolation.
Right. And I think there might be some truth to the fact that he was quite a bit alone then. But part of the movement of the counterculture, and I don't know where you lie in that area in terms of age or knowing, and you as well, Sheila, but we have come a long way is how I feel. And not just my parents, but others, probably you included with your homeschooling and things that you've done, is that we have continued to open the door to be able to do this without having to do it so extremely.
This is this idea of conscious parenting, that we can look at our choices and we can make those choices carefully, thoughtfully, where we have so many different ways of being in the world right now. We have so many opportunities. And so we just want to deepen the conversation around those choices that we make, and then finding our voice. You talked about,
Yes.
sort of looking at your inner child, also finding your own place in the world, breaking through limiting beliefs. And so it seems as if this whole journey has been part of that coming full circle for you.
Oh, in just such an immense way, right? Because you can imagine the conflict for me growing up how I did, and then coming into the world at 12 years old by traumatic circumstance, really. So it was kind of a forced, although I desired coming into the world, I wanted to go to school. I wanted to be in the world and be with other people. But that meant not being with my parents. So what a conflict of a cognitive dissonance, if you will, for a young child to experience. And then that continued for me, because everything that was of the world, my father was not, because he had started living these principles, and he stayed living on the mountain I grew up on, until he died. And so it took me a long time to realize, like, my resistance to money, for example. And imagine even that when I became a writing coach 5 years ago, that I wasn't fully aware of this pattern, that I had the resistance to money, because I thought, well, I grew up without any money. I want lots of money, right? Well, consciously, yes, but the subconscious on this deep level was saying, well, you can't have the same value as a human being if you have a lot of money, or if you have nice things even, right? Like, you need to be simple. You need to be, feet barefoot in the dirt. And that's how I was taught to live. And we really didn't use much money. I hardly saw money at all during my childhood. We were mostly sustainable, and there was barter and trading going on, and that was built on relationships. So there was a lot of valuable lessons there. But, money as a tool or as energy, that was very removed from me. So having to face that in my journey to come fully into myself, to become a woman using her voice and leading others to use their voice and write their books and own their story, a really tough spiritual journey, right? I really love that we can get into money and talk about how it's actually spiritual, because I think there's plenty of us that feel like money is not spiritual, and that's why I can't touch it or have a lot of it, you know.
But it's just energy. And so, you know, we get to revisit our ideas about all of those things. And you're helping other women find their voices. You're helping people. So your teen years then were spent away from your parents, but within the community. And
within the community, within the community, you know, I lived in foster care, and I have an amazing story with foster care. You hear so many sad stories about foster care, and mine was just such a miracle in my life. One woman that took all 5 of us, and she really taught me about unconditional love.
Beautiful story. And yet you've been able to continue. You were able to have a relationship with your parents.
Because of my foster mom.
Interesting.
If I could say anything out there to any parent, because when you're a foster parent, you're a parent. When you've adopted, you're a parent. When you have biological children, you're a parent. We're even in parenting situations that have all kinds of mix of things, right? And I think the greatest thing that we can give a child is acceptance, and acceptance of where they come from. And so my foster mom, Ida, knew that. She knew that, you know, you go into foster care often and they might say, well, your parents, you know, they just really messed up and they did all these things, so we had to take you from them, and then you don't really see them anymore. Or it's a very difficult gap to bridge that relationship. And my foster mom, like I said, you know, her core value was unconditional love. And so she didn't just bestow that to me, she bestowed it to my mother and father, and took me back up the mountain. Didn't just say, well, you know, your social worker can take you or something. No, I'm going to take you. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to be a part of this. I'm going to teach you forgiveness and love. And so that opened the doorway for me being able to have a relationship with my parents, as well as my mother, my second mother that was mothering me at that time, right?
Yeah. I mean, the teen years are so difficult anyhow, all of these components, and yet to go through that with such unconditional love, like you said, and also such grace, and then to come through that and become a mother in your own right. And now here, sharing your story with the world. You talk about, you know, that journey of breaking through to actually share your story with the world. And I think so many of us as women hesitate. You know, we think our story isn't interesting enough, or it's too painful, or we don't find our own voice. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about where you're taking this now with the women that you're working with.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a theme of too much or too little. I'll tell you that, because everybody comes through the door, I don't have a story, it's just too little, not enough. Or, you know, it's too much, it's too sad, it's too traumatic, too this, too that. And all of that really just lends to the idea that we haven't been able to own our story with all the parts of it, right? We have limiting beliefs and pockets, if you will. Even you could be a very successful business owner and woman and mother in certain areas, and there are still these pockets where there's these little holes of self-esteem or self-worth, right, in valuing ourselves. And so those little pockets are the things that we avoid. We've spent a lot of our life avoiding them. So going back into our story is saying, guess what? I'm gonna look at all the pockets. And hey, we've built a lot of resistance so that maybe at the time we had to cope, right, to get through things, whether it was something in our childhood growing up or coming into adulthood and having difficult and challenging relationships. Those pockets are there. And so what I do is I help people really come back to see that the story is stored in the whole body. And one, first of all, that it's going to be okay to go into those pockets. Okay. There's a lot of fear that we're going to get stuck there. Why would I go there? I've spent plenty of time, Chloe, making sure that I don't get stuck there, right? But what people don't realize is they actually are stuck there some. They've just learned how to avoid it. But it's in the body, it's in the blood, it's taking time, it's taking energy. So the work that we want to do is really, I call the work of an emotional warrior, because we're going to be able to go into those pockets through writing and feeling and articulation and learning about craft and, creating a scene and a story. And we're doing it in that way. And we're learning how to move the energy and move the story. And so we're going into the pocket and then coming out the other side of it. And when people understand, I don't have to go there and get stuck there. Mm-hmm. That's when there's some freedom of being able to tell their story. Oh my God, I can go there. I can own it. I can feel it. I can bring the power in my message with it. And I can move through it and come out the other side. And that's what really owning your story is about. We transcend the trauma and the narrative that lived there for so long, right?
And sometimes it's trauma that we don't even know that we are carrying. Sometimes it's, the generational trauma. We've done some interviews with women that are doing generational healing, and that, we're carrying the DNA of our ancestors as well. And so I really feel as if it's our time right now, as women in this society, to really own those stories, to be able to go back and heal those, and to be able to then set our, and you said in your quote, and the truth shall set us free, of course. Yeah. And then also, so our children will have this clear path forward, that they won't be carrying all of the baggage, so that they can ultimately reach their full potential. So, we're talking about this whole idea of now, how can we raise this next generation with more of their own power, the young men and the young women, to really be free, conscious individuals for a new humanity, really.
Yes, and I think that's where we've been moving for years, and both of you are doing that work, which just, to me, resonates how far we're coming. And the more people I meet, and, I think there is something about women in particular right now. We've had a lot of heaviness around the Me Too movement and this cracking open, if you will, right? Where things have been a certain way and there's been a lot of trauma, and there's a certain amount of ugliness that comes out of the cracking open and the shifting in a culture, right? And within that also lies all the beauty. And I do feel like there is this particular thing with women where we can lead the way as healers. And it's not about segregation from men, because you saw my journey in the book where I deeply love my father, and the loss of my dad was just one of the hardest things of my life, as much as I struggled with him. And other men in my life as well. I'm divorced. I have 2 small kids and went through a divorce already when they were really young, because of these patterns, and trying to really come home to myself and have the value that I needed and have the right relationship for myself. But as women, we're sort of all in that box. And I feel like there is just such powerful energy for us to lead the healing with ourselves and rising together. And then also leading healing with men, where it isn't a separation, but we're together.
You embody that, the balance of the feminine and the masculine. And even when you're writing about your mother and your father and your sisters and your brothers, I mean, there's just this whole, striving for that balance. And we talk about that a lot, this idea that we have to reclaim our feminine power, but we also have to find this balance. And so I think that, the work that you're doing is so beautiful. So in the few minutes that we have left, can you tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing with the Voices Project and your retreats?
Yeah. So, out of writing my memoir and this whole experience that we've been talking about, the fundamental thing for me was that I really found my voice. Right. And we have our voice in different layers. But when I'm talking about really finding the voice and my ability to write, and that ability to speak your truth, right? To know the truth and to be able to speak it, to no longer be hindered or afraid, even when it comes to the table to write, because it's one thing to speak it verbally. And then when we come to write, I mean, I'll just tell you, because I've been doing this a long time, and people are like, I don't know if I really want to say that. And we start getting really hung up because the writing is a bit deeper, and it's like, wow, I'm really going to be pungent with this truth here and say this. And we're really learning how to do that. And so my journey has led me through that. And coming out of that, I just wanted to do a book series called Voices, because I'm like, this power of voice, this is it. If I can get people connected to their voice, where they can really write that truth, right? They can do it in a book. They can use it in their life. And right now, I'm doing it with women because, like I mentioned, feeling that enormous power that we as women have to come together and bring healing. And so I'm doing one series a year. So right now we're about to release our first series in November. It will come out, and we have 12 authors in that book. And these women are telling what I call their braving it all story. I feel like, people start talking, sharing their story, and I'll be like, there it is, the braving it all story. It's like, whether we recognize it or not, we have done that. We have been down that journey where it's like, I was at this point and I didn't know how I was going to make it. I was at this point and I didn't know how I was going to overcome this, right? And so it's really looking at that journey that you've come through to be who you are. And for many of us, I think you guys are in this particular situation, right? Where you're doing something that is a living purpose, right? Mm-hmm. This thing that you're doing is like, I'm making an impact. I am using my voice. I am making a difference. I'm doing it in connection, not just to a job or a career, if you will.
It's
right?
a calling. I feel as if we get to a point where we're called forth.
Yes, exactly. And you're doing that. So the voices movement is really for that particular thing to be brought to the page, to be brought into a book. So, because I can't tell you how much like this changed my business and my life impact, my purpose, right? Because to be able to write it and get that message down concrete and then send it out into the world, it can just help so much. It helps so much with your audience and reaching people and really getting that message out, right?
But it's so vulnerable as well. I mean, to share your story out into the world.
It's incredibly vulnerable. And for women that feel, I think, really vulnerable about it, because there's a variance of that for people, the Voices Project is incredible because we come together. So we actually do it in a retreat format where 10 women come together to write that story. It's an amazing experience. People come in with the resistance and falling apart and the crying. And my women in Voices are going to hear this. And yes, this did happen with some of us, but it's total transformation. It's like transformation from day 1 to day 2 to day 3 to day. It's just so unimaginable. And the collectiveness and the unity and seeing the universality in our stories, right? But also we really get to that heart of the uniqueness where every single woman is seen and heard. And let me tell you, they see and hear and feel things of themselves that they did not know, right?
And that's what I find with children. We all, and even as adults, we all want to be seen, heard, and honored for exactly who we are.
Yes.
So you're doing that with these people, and I'm sure it's so liberating. And I look forward to much more together on our path. Do you have people other than, of course, your family and your foster mom who have influenced you? Do you have, other writers or spiritual teachers or anybody who has been an inspiration to you?
Yeah. In terms of, I have a mentor right now named Jane Bradley. She's 80 years old. Mm-hmm. And hi, Jane Bradley. Oh my gosh. She's a phenomenal mentor, and she's run just so many businesses in her life and been a highly successful businesswoman, but also raised 4 children, also, lived through divorce and a death of the love of her life after that. She's just, somebody that has just transcended so many things in her story. And right now she's my business mentor. I feel really fortunate to be around her. And I also mentor her in writing. So I love these connections where it's like you give to each other, right? you find the area where each of you has the gift, and you give that to each other. In terms of writing, I love Anne Lamott. I don't know if you've read any of her work. She's witty and sarcastic, and a little bit more sarcastic maybe than I am. But sometimes I think we need that. Like, we need that connection to other writers where it's like, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she said that, And I like Elizabeth Gilbert a lot too. I think just because she writes on, women's issues and feelings and things that we deal with in life in a real and raw way. Maya Angelou, who cannot love Maya Angelou? Talk about real and raw and overcoming and transcending. And I write a lot of poetry. So Maya Angelou has just always been so close to my heart. And I wish that she were still here and that I could get her to do voices with us.
Oh.
I'm shooting for the stars here. From, and not that anybody is less or anybody is more, honestly, because collectively we bring what we need to, and we bring the power together, right? It's really about the unity. So,
and we see that people show up in our lives for all kinds of different reasons, and
Yes.
it's been so much fun, getting to know you and how all of these connections come together, and we speak our truths, and that ripples out into the world, and the people that we're meant to touch and are meant to come into our world. So we are so grateful that you've been able to be in our world this morning with us. And can you please let our listeners know how they can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Well, Chloe Rachel Gallaway on Facebook, really simple. I have people messaging me on Messenger all the time. It's been amazing to have a book out, and I wrote the book in a way that I feel like people know that they can reach out to me. And so that often happens. Somebody will say, I was up till 4 a.m. reading your book last night, and they'll reach out to me, and I think that's testimonial to how we write and how we connect with people, right? So Facebook and Messenger, good. And then they can go to ChloeRachelGallaway.com. I think you guys will put that in the link.
Yes, this will be in the show notes.
Yeah, and that's my main website. And if they're interested in joining the Voices Project for Women, that's an interview process where I interview you to find alignment. And and there, I help people write full-length books as well. So I do 2 retreats a year for that. And my life is writing and retreats and wellness and raising children in the midst of that, and really realizing that we're never too young actually to start owning our story. My kids are 6 and 9. And it's taken me a little bit of time to realize that too, that like, even when my son was 4 and he was having sadness and emotion, that I didn't have to completely protect him, which is very hard as a mother, but that this was going to be part of his story too. And that my work would be to empower him from a very young age to be in acceptance of his own story and realize that he had power there. He had power to get through it. Right. And the same thing for my daughter. So.
And that all of this just helps to create who we are and who we're meant to be, and the potential there, and the places that our children will take us as well. And that's been amazing for us to see and to just enjoy that journey. Sheila and I talk about the dance of parenting, and there's no one way, and our children come to us, they come through us, and we're all in it.
We really need to do like a Voices series for mothers, right? That would be something to talk about, because the journey of motherhood, and like you brought that up a lot, and you guys are doing a lot of work around that. That's a big journey to really glean the gift and process also the struggle that we have in it, right?
I love that idea. Well, more to come, I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Chloe. I didn't say much, but I just want to say, because Maria, you just did a lovely interview, and through the whole interview, I am almost on the verge of tears right now, and you can hear it in my voice, and I don't know why, but you just brought something up for me. So thank you for hearing your story and letting me, feel the motivation to go through mine, obviously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm with you. I am with you. Thank you so much, Sheila. Yes. Both of you. Thank
So
you,
the power of story and of
Mhm.
storytelling and the connection, the human connections. And so that is, when I read your book, I knew that I wanted to speak with you, that I wanted to hear more of what you had to say, that you were bringing something out. And so Sheila, that was so beautiful that you shared that as well. So
Yeah. It's divinely orchestrated, I say.
Yeah.
So we just remain open to the divine
Yep.
orchestration
Yeah.
and have to sit in awe of it, and then other things happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna see what else happens.
Yeah. Exactly.
sometimes I feel like we're pushing so hard, and sometimes we need to just be open to how all of these things unfold.
Yeah,
So,
that's very true, Maria.
yeah.
Yes, wisdom.
So thank you so much for that.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being with us today. We are just so blessed to have had this time with you. We really honor you and your journey. Highly recommend the book, The Soulful Child, and we'll look forward to more conversations.
Thank you. Thank you both so much.
We'll see you next time on The Moms I Know.
Thanks for joining us today for The Moms I Know. To learn more about Sheila and her online program, The Mom Map, visit purplebeetnutrition.com. For Maria's monthly blog and to learn more about her group programs and retreats, visit soquelessentials.com. That's SOQUEL essentials.com. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Moms I Know. Until next week, have a joyful family journey.